Welcome back to Talk Back Georgia. I'm your host, The Jewel. When we was here before, I had such a fantastic time that I decided that we should have part two of voting. As you may remember, we all decided some time ago, and I know you've had conversations with your friends and relatives as well, that voting is one of the most important things that we can do in order to achieve the things that we want in life. And one of the things we talked about was to make sure that we would not continue down the road of down party voting, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, or what have you. The most important thing that we should be doing is vetting our candidate, whether they are an incumbent or just a new candidate that's coming on to run for a position. We must know everything there is to know about the candidate and the incumbent, because it's so important that you know where they have they been in your community, and what they've been doing in your community and in their own community. So that's just a little synopsis, but I want you to understand that we're going into part two of voting, because we need to talk about what happens to us when we don't vote, when we do vote, and when we vote the wrong way. So it's very, very important for us to get the gist of the whole segment of voting, because it's so important. So many of our people died for us to have this right to vote. So we're definitely going to explain to you what happens to you when you do not vet your candidate and make sure that you know everything that there is to know about that candidate, or whether they're an incumbent. Because if there's an incumbent, you need to be able to go back, if you can, to their platform and follow up. They might have had 5 different segments that they were going to do. If they have not done those things, then one of the things that you want to do is decide whether or not this is someone that you want to go back to the polls and vote for again. Because we have so many incumbents. Some are very good, and some are just there for the perks or whatever to get what they want. So I want you to understand, I have a surprise for you today. While we're talking about the second part of voting, I'm going to introduce someone to you, but give me just a moment. Let's take a moment to breathe a little bit, and I'll be right back. Welcome to Talk Back Georgia. As we said before, that we were going to be coming back talking about what happened to you when you don't vote, or when you go vote and you're not voting correctly. We also talked about that which we don't want to happen to us continuously, and that is we vote down party lines, whether you are Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, or whatever. We want to make sure that you understand that you have to vet your candidate. So we also talked about the fact that you need to understand what happened to you when you vote incorrectly. So my surprise guest is right here with me, and this is Mr. Rashad Snelling, who is a very strong advocate in the city of South Fulton. So he's going to be sharing with us some of the things that we have experienced when we have been voting incorrectly. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to him so he can share some of those things with us, and it might be a point where I may jump in there and say a few little things myself. So without anything else, go ahead, Mr. Snelling.
Well, first off, thank you for having me, Ms. Jewell. It's a pleasure to be here. And again, thank you for the listeners for also joining today. As we're on the segment of talking about voting, there's a couple things that I just wanted to talk about, which was one of the first things I wanted to talk about was when you request your ballot and you request a nonpartisan ballot, there's a misunderstanding that you're getting a ballot that has all the candidates on it, and what they're doing is they're taking off the candidates that are either Democratic or Republican or Independent, and what they're doing is they're just putting the nonpartisan candidates on your ballot. So in the last election, we've had complaints from voters where they've said they requested a nonpartisan ballot, but all they were able to do was vote on the judges. So I think that's very important to point out.
That is very
Yes.
important.
Yeah, and I know you probably got those complaints as a former candidate as well.
Yes, I have. I've had those same complaints.
Yes. And another thing, there's this misconception that some people have that if you, when you vote, you'll be able to see who you voted for. The only time you can see who you voted for is actually at the poll, when you get your ballot printed out, or when you're doing your confirmation on the screen. That's really the only time that you can see who you voted for. When you go onto the My Voter page, you can see a record that you voted, but you will not be able to see who you voted for. So that's another important topic that
Yes.
should be brought up as well.
Yes, it is, because I feel that when you scan your ballot, you should be able to see after you scanned it who you actually voted for. So, in other words, it should be something like a receipt. Although I understand that Georgia has some type of law that say that you can't have one, but there's no law that said we can't change that, because I feel like after you voted, you should be able to see that exactly where your vote went.
Yeah, and so you mentioned something that resonated with me when you were talking about voting down party lines. I don't like to tell people how to vote. However, I will say just consider not voting down the party line, because just because someone is in your party does not mean they share your values. And like you said, vet your candidates. That is the most important thing you could do, is vet your candidates. And when you're vetting those candidates, where you're getting the information is equally as important as the information itself.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Can you expound a little bit more about some of the negatives you get when you don't vote or when you vote the wrong way?
Okay, so when you do not vote, you're pretty much giving up your voice that you have. That is really the only voice you have. Going on social media or talking to your neighbors or sending text messages to people, that's not going to cut it. You have to, if you want your voice heard, you have to go to the polls, and you have to exercise that freedom at the polls. Not vetting your candidates, you end up with situations like we have in South Fulton, where you thought that the incumbent was going to keep doing the job that they were elected to do, when in terms you find out they're not really doing the job that you would expect them to do. And we've seen examples of freedoms getting limited, freedoms getting just thrown out altogether. So we've seen situations like that because people just did not vet their candidates. They thought the candidate stood for one thing, but had they really vetted the candidate, they would have found out that that's simply not the case.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. There have been some situations that when people did not vote, where we had a very low turnout, and a lot of people was not satisfied with the results.
Right.
And as a result of that, there has been a lot of confusion and a lot of things that has transpired. And I was wondering if you were if you remembered some of those things that you could kind of share with us.
Yeah, so let's take the city of South Fulton into consideration. We have roughly over 108,000 residents in the city of South Fulton. But yet we have like record low turnout with voters. So with that record low turnout, a lot of people wanted to change in like the head of the Fulton County Commission, different members on the commission. They wanted to see a change in leadership. You also had city council races that you saw a very low turnout in. You have state representative races that you saw a low turnout. There were qualified challengers that ran for these seats, and voters thought that they were going to see a change in leadership, but we didn't see the change in leadership because people sat it out and did not come and vote.
That's very good. You know, we had a very high turnout in 2020. Mm-hmm. And it has come to my attention and a lot of other people's attention and that is in voting, especially in South Fulton. It appears that we are a little confused. We're very confused. But what you have shared with us has been very important. And I want to thank you for coming on and sharing some of those. And I'd like to ask, somewhere in the future, would you consider to come back and address some more issues for us?
Absolutely. We have a lot of important things to discuss.
Well, very good. We are just overly glad that you are here. And again, thank you so much. And thank you, audience, for being with us. Thank you for coming back with us. My guest has looked at his time and he has a little bit more time to be with us. So Mr. Snellen is back to share some more interesting things with us as it relates to how voting affect you when you are not voting correctly. So Mr. Snellen, can you elaborate a little bit more for us about some of the things that really hurts us when we don't vote or when we vote incorrectly?
Yeah, so we've saw cases where at the beginning of last year, our elected officials in the city of South Fulton, they sent out flyers wasting taxpayer funds, and a lot of taxpayers were upset about that. We approached these elected officials that did this, and they just dismissed us, and that is something that we need to be taken into consideration when we're voting. Another situation that we recently saw, which I know you've been very vocal about, is with the sanitation situation that's going on in the city of South Fulton. We did not ask for this change to our sanitation. It was pretty much forced down our throats, and we really had nothing that we can do about it. So these are the kinds of things that posting on social media is not going to fix. We have to vet these candidates. We have to find out some of the things that they're going to do. We have to find out, are they truly going to listen to what the people want, the people that sent them to office? So those are just some of the things that we should be vetting our candidates on.
You are 100% right. I have experienced that myself. And those are the things that we're talking about that hurts us when we vote incorrectly or when we don't go vote. It is so important to vet your candidate. And even with vetting your candidate as well as you can, we may still end up with some problems because let's be honest, a lot of our people will not be as truthful as you and I and tell us exactly why they're running and what their platform is. So I'm suggesting to everyone that whether it's an incumbent or whether it's a candidate that's running for the first time, that you ask for their platform. Ask them to show their platform and have it notarized. And the reason I said notarized because we want them to make it public, and we don't want anyone else to come along and try and distort their platform. So once you receive that platform, I would suggest that you keep up with it so you can keep up with what it is that the candidate and the incumbent is doing, because that will give you a good area of vetting them for their performances. So you can make that decision when it's time to vote to either keep them or not vote for them. So at this point, I'm going to ask you, Mr. Snelling, if you had any more things that you wanted to
Yes, I
share
do.
with us. So will you please iterate a little bit for
Yeah,
me?
so something that just bothered me to note, and on Tuesday, everybody in South Fulton knows about the series of meetings that happened. Now, the very first meeting, I believe, that meeting set the tone for what the events that happened later that evening. There was a press conference with 2 elected officials, 2 out of 8 elected officials. And the reason I say 8 is because you have the mayor and then you have 7 city council representatives. I was pleased to see that none of the other elected officials supported what went on Tuesday, but we had a press conference. At that press conference, you had 2 rogue city council members who went on the attack and start attacking staff at City Hall. They just start making up their own facts. They would not allow the community that was there to comment. The comment was specifically made, only credentialed media is allowed to speak instead of hearing from the people who sent them into office. So that just set the tone for all of the events that went on that evening. I have heard from people that work for the city how upset they were by that press conference. So these are some of the things we have to take into consideration when we're voting on these candidates. If they have a record of bad behavior, then don't vote for them again. Because if you vote for them again, you're going to get 2 to 4 more years, depending on what the position is. You're going to get 2 to 4 more years of that same bad behavior. And it'll probably end up getting worse. So that's one thing that I would like to point out. And then elected officials who weaponize law enforcement to try to control what citizens say and do at public meetings inside of public facilities. That is just unacceptable. That should not be allowed to happen. So those are just 2 things that I think we should have more of a discussion on. What do you think?
I am with you 100% because I happen to have been one of those people that was at a town hall meeting where a council person did not want me to ask a question. In fact, she started off by saying, I see a lot of people here that is not from my district. So if you have questions, you may ask those questions, but I will take those questions and turn them over to your council person so your council person can ask them for you, which didn't make much sense to me. And I thought maybe she misstated or something. So I raised my hand to try and ask a question. And she says, no, I'm just going to go ahead and call up my next guest. And she said to me in a lower tone, I heard it and a few others heard it, you're not coming in here and disrupt my meeting. And after she had introduced her guest, she went out of the room, I mean, very fast, real fast. And when she came back with several police officers, and they lined up in front of the door that was facing me, looking at me to intimidate me. They did not say anything to me, and I did not say anything to them. But I feel that we should not tolerate that. That was bullying, and I don't believe in bullying, and that was not the first time that this council person has done that to me. So I strongly support everything that has been said by Mr. Snelling here, and I hope that you all, my guests in the audience, will take heed to a lot of the things that we've shared with you. And I want to say thank you for being with us. I want to thank Mr. Snelling for being with us. And I hope sometime in the future you'll be willing to come back and share more with us.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to Talk Back Georgia. Thank you so much for being with us today on our second phase of voting. Voting is so important. And I just can't stress it enough Because when you look at all the things that are happening in our city, our county, our state, and around the country, we're in a situation where if we're not voting, things will continue to get worse. We must vote even to save our democracy. As I've said before, if you are not voting and you're voting wrong, that means that you're not going to get what you want. You can't complain because voting is you. It determines what you get. And I am really pushing voting because I would like, and so many of you would like to see a change in some of the things that are happening to us. And the only way we're going to get them is that we go out and vote. I just want you to understand that it is important. It was so many of our people died for us to have the right to vote. So I am saying to you, thank you so much for joining Mr. Snelling and I on voting. And I want to encourage you to make sure that you vote in the upcoming election for November for the city of South Fulton. We have 4 positions available: District 1, District 3, District 5, and 7. Please tune in to voting if you don't do anything else. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on Talk Back Georgia next week.